Imagine the stillness of a desert night shattered by the roar of jet engines and the distant thunder of explosions. Somewhere in Iran, beneath tons of reinforced concrete and deep inside hardened bunkers, its nuclear facilities are under attack. This isn't a scene from a movie. It's a scenario that has haunted military planners, diplomats, and energy analysts for over 2 decades. And while it may appear to be a tactical victory, a blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions, the truth is, it could unleash a wave of consequences more dangerous than the threat it was meant to neutralize. Let's begin with the most immediate risk, the humanitarian and environmental fallout. Iran's key nuclear sites, Natanz, Fordow, and Arak, are not just heavily fortified, they are also potentially radioactive zones. If these sites are bombed, there's a strong possibility that nuclear material could be released into the surrounding environment. Radioactive dust and debris could spread through the air, contaminating towns and cities, farmlands, rivers, and aquifers. Civilian populations nearby, workers, families, children, could face long-term exposure to radiation. Hospitals, already stretched thin in many parts of Iran due to economic sanctions, would struggle to manage the influx of radiation-related illnesses. The ecological damage could last for decades, with cancer rates and birth defects rising steadily long after the initial strike fades from headlines. But this is just the beginning. Iran would not suffer such a strike in silence. The Islamic Republic has consistently warned that any attack on its nuclear program would be considered an act of war. And it has spent years building up a network of military options in response. Iran could launch missile strikes against U.S. military bases in Iraq, Syria, or the Persian Gulf. It could target Israeli cities and infrastructure with the help of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Proxy groups in Yemen and Iraq might strike Saudi oil facilities or disrupt maritime trade. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which nearly 20% of the world's oil passes, could become a war zone. Mines, missiles, and drone attacks could grind shipping to a halt. Even a brief closure would send oil prices skyrocketing and rattle the global economy. What might have started as a so-called surgical strike could rapidly evolve into a regional war. Countries like Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and even the United States could find themselves pulled into a broader conflict. Airstrikes would be met with counterattacks. Cyber warfare would intensify. Civilian casualties would rise across the region. Cities already scarred by years of war, like Baghdad, Damascus, or Beirut, could face new waves of violence. Millions of people could be displaced. The entire Middle East could be engulfed in flames. And this brings us to the global stage. The economic shock would be swift and severe. Oil prices could double or even triple overnight, especially if tankers are attacked or major ports are disrupted. Gasoline prices at pumps across Europe, Asia, and the Americas would surge. Stock markets would plunge as investors flee to safer assets. Supply chains, still recovering from pandemic-era disruptions, would face new bottlenecks. Industries reliant on petrochemicals and transportation, from airlines to agriculture, would feel the strain almost immediately. And ordinary people, from truck drivers in India to small business owners in Brazil, would pay the price in higher costs and greater uncertainty. Now consider the nuclear dimension. Ironically, attacking Iran's nuclear facilities may actually accelerate its pursuit of nuclear weapons. Up to this point, Iran has always insisted that its program is peaceful, and although Western powers remain skeptical, it remains a party, at least nominally, to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. A military strike would shatter that. Iran could withdraw from all international oversight. It could kick out International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors and go underground, both literally and diplomatically. The regime could fast-track weaponization and justify it to its people as a matter of survival. This could, in turn, lead regional rivals, such as Saudi Arabia or Turkey, to begin their own nuclear programs, sparking a dangerous arms race in one of the world's most volatile regions. And what of the political and diplomatic aftermath? Regardless of who carries out the strike, whether it's Israel acting alone, or a joint operation with American support, there would likely be widespread international condemnation. The European Union, Russia, China, and much of the global south would denounce the attack as a violation of international law. Street protests could erupt across the Muslim world, from Jakarta to Casablanca. Even moderate Arab governments aligned with the West would find themselves under pressure from their populations. The United Nations would be thrown into crisis. The already fragile framework of international cooperation on arms control and conflict prevention could unravel further. At home in Iran, hardliners would seize the moment. Any remaining moderates or reformists would be discredited. National unity would be forged in defiance, not diplomacy. Future negotiations, such as a renewed nuclear deal like the JCPOA, would become politically impossible. The road to peaceful resolution would be blocked, perhaps for an entire generation. So we return to the original question. What risks could arise from an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities? The answer is not a single risk, but a chain reaction of dangers: environmental, military, economic, nuclear, and diplomatic. Each one feeds the next. A military strike might delay Iran's nuclear progress for months, maybe a few years. But it could cost the world a decade or more of peace, stability, and trust. In the end, the greatest risk may not lie in Iran's underground bunkers, but in the illusion that military solutions can solve geopolitical problems. Because once the bombs fall, we don't just break concrete. We break diplomacy. We break alliances. And sometimes, we break the future itself.